I'm Bear Jones, this is Running Railroads. I thought I'd try something different. Instead of a simple mine layout, we'd do something with a yard that sends and receives trains. So we're spending most of our time delivering things, yes, but also we're building trains to send off to staging that represent different locations. This yard here will, in my fake railroad here, it'll build an express train which will have all the high priority stuff on the way in. That'll be fruit and vegetable and the equivalent of, DHL traffic or UPS traffic to the freight houses. And then there'll be just a regular train that will bring in everything else that's not a high priority, that can get there when it gets there. There's also another yard next to it which represents like a southern railroad. There's meant to be interchanging, and this yard will take loads to the other yard, but I haven't finished building or setting up the other yard, so it's not bringing in loads to this yard. But for one operator, you don't really need two yards. So to clear out a track for an inbound train, we're going to deliver two loads, and we're going to pick up empties that we can use to build outbound loads. So first we're going to switch the beer distributor, and then after that we're going to pick up a load from a fruit and vegetable dealer and deliver a load to a foundry or a manufacturer that's just going to be taking shipments of things and then manufacturing other stuff and shipping it by truck, or perhaps it goes locally. There could be like a real anxiety in model railroading of what's realistic, what will get shipped by train, and what doesn't get shipped by train. In the era that we're manufacturing, it doesn't really matter. Everything's going by train, basically. The other thing too is, because it's old enough, you can just look at freight shipping guides and see what normally would be on the rail line. And so a lot of manufacturers are still receiving carloads of things that they use to make stuff. So the old joke is it could just be a carload of widgets for your widget factory. I also had to do some editing of the music. I've been going through a bit of an ambient phase, but some of the stuff that I'd written for this video ended up being a bit too discordant and stress-inducing. It was like the soundtrack to Tenet or something. So there's been a few edits, hopefully seamless, but there's a lot of synthesizer sounds and guitar sounds that are being run through a delay that diffuses the sound to make it sound like it's appearing out of nowhere. Hopefully it's still pleasant enough and not the techno-y house sound that I normally put these videos to. Hopefully it's rather soothing, but not so soothing as to put you asleep. Really, the whole idea was I wanted to try and create something that was dynamic and would sort of play itself, where you wouldn't need to do paperwork or run like a third-party program. Running a mining railroad is simple because it's just to and fro, but it is kind of simple and repetitive. It can be really cool if done well, but I wanted to try something completely different in that regards. I'm using what's called a car tab system. In real life, you'd stick coloured tabs or pins on the top of the the cars, and that would tell you where things are going and would allow you to route things as you needed. I based the trains starting by dividing them by two, because the yard's not big enough to handle 10 trains a day and it wouldn't be fun. It'd be just a job, and you don't want your model railroad to be a job. You want it to be something fun to play around with. Also, a lot of the freights obviously come in the night. That's because you take delivery of it on Monday and then you ship it Monday night, and it arrives at its destination hopefully first thing Tuesday morning, so that you can then deliver it in the morning on Tuesday. Trains just looks like crap at night. So all the trains arrive in the daylight. There's basically one express freight, which would normally have some sort of name, which I haven't quite yet decided on. Probably something with a colour or something, and then streak. Then there'd be just your everything else manifest train that would come after, that wouldn't be as high priority. And then I've never really modelled passenger trains, so there's a couple of passenger trains. I'd imagine most of the switching near the terminal would be done by the yard switcher, but going down to 8th Street would probably have its own crew, and there'd probably be another crew that would just help out. It would do the transfers to the other yards and things like that. And then obviously you'd need separate crews for all the trains that leave. And what makes this era so fascinating is, in real life terms, in 10 years, a lot of the traffic's going to go to trucks. A lot of the manufacturers are going to shut down. So a fake town like this is going to lose half of its traffic. And so this kind of freezes it in time. So here's the New York Central train coming in. As you can see, I haven't really done the scenery nearby at all for this. There's just the dreaded grid. You can see my evil secrets of basing stuff on the grid. And now that we've freed up the room in the yard, it's coming into track 1. I wasn't really thinking when I put together this train, because there's a reefer car on the head end of the thing. So I'd imagine that if there's fruit and vegetables on the front of a train, you'd want to get it off. So I decided that it was filled with fruit and vegetables and it needed to be taken off the train. And there were some other cars nearby that needed to be delivered, so I figured in real life you'd probably kill 2 birds in one stone. I guess the question would be is, if there's like a regular scheduled job, this is like an extra train. So I don't know what you do with the people that were expecting to do the job later in the afternoon. The other thing I never really model is engine terminals. So here we're just putting the engine away, pretending that it needs to be fueled and sand, and that gives us an excuse to rotate through our different engines. They were chosen basically on how cool they looked and a variety of colours. So even though I don't think they were interchanging engines at this stage, it's something they do nowadays in real life, but I don't think back in the mid-50s when we're pretending this is, they were doing. But for the sake of having colour, we're interchanging engines. And we've pulled out one of our other engines, pretending that it's loaded and with fuel and sand and ready to operate. Again, it stops us from running trains backwards and forwards. It allows us to actually have a bit of variety in the trains we use and what we're doing. So we're pulling the reefer car off the inbound train. There's also coincidentally 2 more cars that are going to the same destination. So if we're sending one train, we might as well dispose these 2 cars as well. So those cars were thankfully already sorted out, and now we're moving the reefer car that's bound for the New York Central just out of the way so we can move this train down to the 8th Street branch. When you operate a yard like this, you really do see how you just want to get your cars out of the yard. You don't want to have your cars sitting in the yard. It's kind of aesthetically pleasing to have like a random assortment of cars in your train yard, and it looks fun when you're running your trains past a yard full of cars, but you actually kind of want to get them out of the yard as soon as possible to make room for more cars. So fruit and vegetables are being delivered by rail at this stage. They get sent from, say, somewhere like California, and then they're routed to Chicago, but on the way to Chicago, they, for free, can be redirected to other locations. So they're sort of like bid in transit and then, sent to different destinations while they're in transit. And that's how like fruit and vegetables move around the country at this stage. The track to the left is the freight house, and behind it you can see the unfinished Louisville and Nashville rail yard that doesn't really do anything, but it looks cool. I'm not entirely sure what this load is, but it's marked in as for the team track. So anyone that has a business that receives things by rail and doesn't have their own spur, that goes to the team track. And in real life, most businesses get 1 carload a year or something. So there'd be 20 discrete businesses that would receive their loads to that team track. And this here is a coal dealer. Coal is still very important in the time we're modelling. This could be small coal for like your stove or your furnace, or it could be something for a boiler for a factory or something like that. It probably isn't metallurgical coal. That's probably going to other places. And we finally bring their engine back and leave it in the depot for a new assignment. I'd imagine what's going to happen is the next time I run this, I'll build the New York Central train, and then this green and yellow locomotive will end up on the front end of the New York Central train. Thank you very much for watching.